Now let's take a look at adding bump maps to our objects. So if we take a quick render, let's say, of this outer portion of our engine, just go ahead and render that up really quick just to see what that looks like. You can see that we have the lines showing, but right now it's just in the color channel of our material. So we just have the different red colors, and then we have the sort of black or dark gray color defining those panels. What we'd like to do is get a nice raised look to this. So it looked like the kind of the grooves here are pushed down into the model. We can do this using bump maps, and bump maps kind of give the illusion of height or depth. No geometry is actually moved. It's just kind of a normal trick to make the eye appear, to make it look like the different panels are raised. So in this case, white part of the image is going to appear raised, whereas a black part of the image is going to appear pushed in. So thinking about that, we can use procedural maps, we can use texture maps that we've painted to define and drive our bump. All right, so let's go ahead and say we want to make these grooves a little bit more pushed in. So let's use the existing procedural map that we're using for the tiles. So we'll go into the material editor. Let's go ahead and get that material. So it's going to be, and let's pull this in. It's going to be this material here. So here we've got our tiles map that we're using. So the first thing I want to do is make a copy of this. So I'll just hold down Shift and pull this off. Now we have a new copy of our map, and let's go ahead and drive this into the bump channel. So now if we take a look at this material, we've got a material assigned to the diffuse, and then down in maps you can see we've got a material assigned to the bump, and then the strength of that is set to 30. Okay, so we can modify that as well. Now for the actual tile map itself, let's take a look at this. We don't need the red color. Okay, so we don't need any of that color. So let's take that red and let's just make that a 50% gray. So I'm going to go ahead and just numerically put these values in and make that gray. We'll take down the color variance. Unless you want some of the panels to appear slightly raised and slightly lowered, you can maybe leave a small amount on that. Okay, now I want to leave the grout at black. Okay, right now it's set to a very small amount, and that should work. Let's just see what this looks like. And all we've done is kind of taken all the color out of this, but now we've got these sort of gray panels and then a black grout between those. So let's take a look at what we've done here just by doing a quick render. So there's just with the color, and then we take a look at this. You can see that now those panels have a very sort of raised up look. We get the nice grooves there between those. And that's just using our bump, and you can kind of see that raised area in here. If you want to kind of make that a little bit thinner, we could change that up and go back in here, change up the horizontal gap, and maybe make that a bit smaller if you want those panels to be a little bit more tightly fit together. We can make that line a little bit smaller, and it'll get a little bit confused here as far as the color. So you might need to come in and do the same thing here on the color, make that a bit narrower, and then see that narrowing up a little bit. We can also increase the strength. So let's go ahead and just increase the strength to 100 and see what that looks like. So we'll increase that bump strength within the material to 100 and re-render this. Okay, so you can see it's now a little bit deeper. Now if we want some of the panels to be slightly more raised than the others, we go in and go back into our panel here, our tiles, and take that color variance up a little bit. Let's just take it way up so we get something like that. Kind of overshoot it a little bit so that we can see what that is going to look like. Okay, so now you can kind of see some of these panels look raised up, some of them not so much. So this effect is overshot quite a bit, but you can make it more subtle if you want to come in here and do that. Maybe add something like 0.3 to really come in and just give a real subtle variation on the height of the different panels there. Okay, so on things like this, you could use this on your panels, any of these other areas that we've got detail added to. We can go ahead and do it on the front fins here. Well, let's actually we can add a little bump here on the cables if you wanted to. I think that's small enough we may not need to do that, but for instance, if I wanted to take this front fin here, and I'm just going to move this material out so we can see this a little bit better, and I want to grab, let's say, another tile, drop this into the color. Okay, and let's take the tile and modify this a little bit. So maybe something like that. Okay, if we go up to our coordinates, we could try kind of rotating this a little bit if we want to get something a little bit different. Maybe kind of rotate that. We could also take the count down and maybe get something like that. We could move this around a little bit more if it's not really exactly what we want it to be. Okay. And so let's just kind of move this around so we get something cool. And then we can go ahead and add that as a color. And again, go ahead and get our, let's get our green. Before we do that, let's actually copy this. And then on the one that's piped into the color, we'll just add that green color back in. Kind of that nice, desaturated, really dark sort of green. And we'll add that line in there for the tiles. Let's go ahead and dial this down. Make this really small. And then we can do the same thing here. Take this into the bump. Again. Taking that down. Taking this down to the black. Alright. And then we can go ahead and just render that up, just to preview what that's going to look like. So you can real quickly just use any of the materials that we're using and pipe one of the procedural maps into the bump channel. Just thinking about the fact that white is going to appear to be raised, and then black's going to appear to be pushed in. Okay. All right. So the next thing that we want to do is to go ahead and modify the specular. So right now you can see that this spec is just real even, and so we don't get a lot of variation here. And on things like this metal, we can make it look a lot better by adding some variation in the specular. So if we look at just render up the engine, we have some nice tiles here, but this specular is just really even and it just looks too clean. And so we can really kind of break it up, not necessarily in the color, but in the specular, the way the light hits it and bounces off. So we will take a look at doing that with some procedural maps in the next lesson.